Have you ever walked into a place where everyone looked at you and immediately decided you didn't belong? They glanced at the clothes you wore, the bag you carried, the way you stood, and thought they knew everything about you. But sometimes, all it takes is a single moment, a single perfect shot, to shatter every prejudice and silence the entire world. This is the story of how I, an ordinary woman, toppled an entire proud kingdom with nothing but determination and an old, battered gun. And if you've ever been underestimated, ever been looked down on, then stay, because this story is for you. If you've ever walked into a place where you could feel, just by the looks thrown your way, that you weren't welcome, then you'll understand exactly how I felt that day. The sharp crack of a gunshot echoed through the elite shooters club, bouncing off the enclosed valley walls like distant thunder. Every eye in the room turned toward one man, Chase Whitmore, as he lowered his expensive Remington rifle, a smug smile spreading across his sun-tanned face, and as if following a well-rehearsed script, the crowd, clad in tailored shooting gear, designer sunglasses and watches worth more than most cars, burst into loud, synchronized applause. I stood there, not even having stepped fully inside yet, and already I could feel the chill of condescension in the air. This wasn't just a shooting club. This was Chase's kingdom, a world built on wealth, power, and elite marksmanship, fortified by invisible walls meant to keep outsiders like me firmly on the other side. I knew it. I saw it in their eyes, cold, judgmental, as if daring me to give them the slightest excuse to throw me out. Chase raised his Remington high, like a king lifting his sword before his loyal subjects. On the digital target board at the end of the range, the result flashed clear. Bullseye. A perfect shot straight into the heart of the target. To them, Chase wasn't just a 5-time national champion or an Olympic gold medalist. He was the embodiment of class, the pinnacle of everything the privileged shooting world stood for. And me, I was nothing more than an accident, an unwelcome intrusion into their hallowed ground. At least that's what they thought. They didn't know. Not yet. Not. Yet that today, their entire kingdom would be shaken by someone like me. I gripped the worn leather strap of my old bag, took a deep breath, and stepped inside. Every footstep echoed against the polished hardwood floor, as if I were trespassing on sacred ground. Tailored shooting vests, perfectly groomed hair, polite, smiles, thin and brittle as ice. They looked at me like I had brought a gust of dusty wind from some far-off, forgotten place into their pristine temple. I knew exactly how I looked. A pale blue cardigan, discount store jeans, sneakers worn, thin at the heels. In this world, I was a dandelion weed growing wild in a manicured rose garden. I walked up to the reception desk, where a blonde girl with a stiff smile was scrolling on a touchscreen. When she noticed me, her gaze flicked down to my old bag, my plain clothes, then back to her screen with ruthless indifference. I spoke up, keeping my voice steady. "Hi. I'd like to register for the open shooting session today." She didn't even bother to look up, just replied coldly. "Members only. Where's your membership card?" I breathed slowly, swallowing the quiet sting of humiliation. From my bag, I pulled out a crumpled envelope. "My father gifted me a day pass," I said, holding out the confirmation slip. Finally, she glanced at me again, this time barely masking her disdain. She scanned the slip, sighed, and reluctantly handed me a lanyard. I took the badge and headed toward the basic shooting lanes, way at the back of the facility, far from the elite lanes where Chase Whitmore and his entourage held court. And that's when I heard it, that familiar, mocking laugh. Chase, clad in his dark shooting gear, leaned casually against the minibar nearby with his friends. He didn't even lower his voice. "Oh, look! Who let Walmart wander in here?" Laughter exploded around him, sharp and loud as firecrackers. The burly men beside him slapped each other's backs, practically howling with amusement. I lowered my head and quickened my pace, a slow burn of anger rising deep inside. I heard every word. I felt every mocking gaze stab into my back. But I didn't react. Not yet. Not here. I made my way to lane 12, set my bag down on the small wooden bench, and began preparing. No one paid me any real attention, except Chase, and his buddies smirking and waiting for a show. Carefully, I opened my bag and pulled out a soft brown cloth bundle. Unfolding it, I revealed my weapon, a standard Glock 19, no diamonds, no custom engravings. No $10,000 laser sight, just a plain utilitarian handgun. Much like myself, their disbelief was almost palpable. One guy nudged Chase and chuckled. $10 says she can't even hit the target. Chase snorted. $10? Nah. I'll bet 10,000 she's never even held a real gun before. I heard it all, every word, every sneer. It sank into me like tiny darts, lighting a slow fire in my veins. Still, I kept my head down, loading rounds into the magazine, securing the safety, checking the action. Movements as natural to me as breathing. No thought required, only instinct, because this wasn't my first time holding a gun. It wasn't my first time being underestimated, and it sure as hell wouldn't be the last time I made someone eat their own smug laughter. I stood up, gripped my Glock firmly, and fixed my gaze on the paper target 25 yards away. I couldn't hear their laughter anymore, not even the beating of my own heart. It was just me and the target. It was time to show them. Never, ever judge someone by appearances alone. I could feel Chase and his gang's stares like dull knives scraping down my back. As I slid the magazine into my Glock 19, a voice rang out, loud enough to make sure everyone around could hear. "Hey, Chase, you seriously betting 10 grand on this?" One of the guys laughed. Chase laughed even louder, tilting his head toward me as if giving a sermon to the whole club. "Everyone, watch closely. She can't even hold the gun right. First shot's gonna go straight into the ceiling." Laughter erupted across the room, echoing against the high walls. I kept my eyes on the target. No reaction, not even a twitch. Another guy chimed in, his voice dripping with mockery. "Hey, lady, if you hit the target, dinner's on me, at the most expensive place in town." More laughter exploded, sharp and cruel. Another challenge, all of it reeking of smug superiority. And me? I smiled, just slightly, just to myself. A smile as cold and sharp as a knife's edge. I loaded the round, racked the slide, and raised the gun to eye level. At that moment, Chase wasn't content to stay back. He pushed through the crowd, closing in until he was just about 5 meters from me. Arms crossed over his chest, eyes squinted with mocking delight. He called out, syrupy sweet with venom, "Hey, sweetheart! Before you waste that first bullet, are you sure you know which end points forward?" Another wave of laughter rippled through the room. For the first time since walking in, I turned my head and looked him straight in the eye, and in Chase's arrogant, disdainful gaze, I saw something. Fear, not obvious, not overwhelming, but it was there. A small flicker, a vague sense that he had just made a mistake. I didn't respond. Instead, I lifted the gun, relaxed my shoulders, and reset my shooting stance, so precise that any seasoned shooter would have nodded in approval. Right then, some in the crowd fell silent. Maybe they noticed the way I gripped the gun, the way I found my breathing rhythm. It didn't look like a beginner. It looked like someone who had done this 1,000 times. Chase must have felt the shift too, because I saw the corners of his smirk stiffen. I locked onto the target. I didn't see Chase. I didn't see the crowd. Only the paper target, that dull white sheet with the black circle center, waiting for me. I exhaled slowly, squeezed the trigger. Bang! The gunshot cracked through the air, rattling off the high ceiling. The room frozen. 1 second, 2 seconds. The electronic system beeped, signaling the result. Every eye turned toward the large screen mounted on the wall. The result appeared. Bullseye. First shot. Dead center. Not off by a hair. The air in the room thickened, heavy and stunned. I lowered my gun, my gaze still fixed on the target. Out of the corner of my eye, I caught Chase standing frozen, mouth open, eyes wide, as if someone had punched all the air out of his chest. A long, painful silence hung over the room. No laughter, no whispers, only the stark truth blaring from the screen. The woman they had mocked and belittled had obliterated the target on her very first shot, and it wasn't just a lucky hit. According to Elite Shooters Club rules, anyone who scored 3 perfect shots in a row during an opening session would earn a place on the club's record board, and Chase Whitmore. He currently holds that record. I casually flexed my wrist and chambered the next round. No one needed to say anything. I could feel every pair of eyes glued to my every movement. And Chase? He started edging backward step by step as if trying to shrink into the crowd where he once reigned like a king. I raised my gun again, exhaled, locked onto the target, ready for the next shot. I lifted the Glock 19 again, feeling the smooth grip settle into my palm. The air around me was still thick, like the heavy calm before a storm. I could hear my heart beat, not from nerves, but from the blood boiling in my veins. One deep breath. A precise trigger pull. Bang! The gunshot cracked through the room, sharp and clean, exploding against the ceiling like a lightning bolt. I lowered the gun, eyes locked on the results screen. A short beep echoed, and then, there it was, clear and undeniable. Bullseye, second shot, dead center. Perfect, flawless. A ripple of whispers spread through the crowd, like a brush fire igniting in dry grass. I caught fragments of murmured voices. Who is she? No way. Just lucky, that's all. I didn't turn my head. I didn't answer. Chase stood frozen at the edge of the practice range, his face pale as if he had just witnessed a shipwreck. His hands, the same hands that had once clutched medals and trophies, were now clenched into fists, knuckles bone white. I inhaled one last time, one more shot. One more chance to silence every sneer, every condescending laugh. I raised the gun, eyes locked onto the bullseye, shutting everything else out. No chase, no crowd, no laughter from before, just me and the target. I held my breath for half a second, then squeezed the trigger. Bang! The shot cracked so loud it seemed to rattle the very walls. Silence, a strange, heavy silence that felt like a weight pressing down on my shoulders. The screen blinked. A beep sounded, and then one word appeared. Bullseye, 3 shots, 3 dead center hits. Flawless. A sigh escaped from somewhere behind me. Not from me, but from someone in the stunned crowd. A few clasps broke out, tentative, as if people weren't sure whether they should cheer or brace themselves. Because if what they had just witnessed was real, if a nobody like me could hit dead center 3 times in a row, then Chase Whitmore, their undefeated champion, had just been dethroned. A small click echoed through the range. I turned, for the first time, facing the crowd head-on. Chase stood there, his face red and burning like a ripe tomato, both hands clenched around his expensive gun, which now looked like a cheap toy in his grip. His eyes locked onto mine, a strange mix of defiance and pleading. For a fleeting moment, something passed between us. I could see him grappling inside, fighting a losing battle between his towering pride and the brutal truth that had just punched him square in the face. I turned away and walked toward the results counter. Linda Carter, the club's manager, was already waiting there. Linda, with her neatly tied brown hair and sharp, discerning eyes, gave me a smile, the kind that I suspected was a rare sight in this place. Congratulations, she said warmly but firmly. 3 consecutive bullseyes. You've just set a new club record. Linda held up a silver plaque where the names of legendary shooters were engraved. I spotted the name Chase Whitmore, still etched there with a record from 3 years prior. And now they were preparing to engrave my name, perhaps even above his. Chase stood just a few feet away, jaw clenched so tightly I could almost hear his teeth grinding. Linda looked at me, then turned to the crowd, her voice ringing clear. The Elite Shooters Club rules are simple. Scores are recorded publicly, verified by the electronic system. No exceptions. No favoritism. A punch straight into Chase's chest. The entire room was silent, no one daring to even cough. A storm had swept through the kingdom Chase once ruled. And in its eye was me. When Linda Carter finished speaking, a ripple of whispers spread through the room. I could feel their eyes. Those who had only moments ago mocked me, now shifting, surprise, admiration, and in a few, even respect. I adjusted the strap of my worn leather bag, quietly walking away from the shooting line. I didn't need to shout. I didn't need to wave a flag. My 3 shots had said everything for me, but I had barely taken a few steps when a cold voice cut through the taut air. "Hold it!" I stopped. Turning, I wasn't surprised to see Chase Whitmore striding toward me. His steps were fast, stiff, like a man trying to keep his balance on thin ice. The entire room held its breath. I could almost hear the squeak of his shoes against the polished floor. Chase stopped about 3 meters away, his face flushed deep red, his eyes burning. At that moment, he was no longer the proud king of the Elite Shooters Club. He was just a man drowning in humiliation. "It's not over," he said through gritted teeth, loud enough for everyone to hear. I crossed my arms, raising an eyebrow. Chase inhaled sharply, then continued. "I challenge you to a duel. 5 shots each. Whoever scores higher will be recognized as the best today." A low murmur rolled through the crowd, a public challenge. Right here, at the Elite Shooters Club, between a 5-time national champion and a nobody newcomer. Linda Carter stepped forward, her gaze stern. "She has no obligation to accept," Linda declared. "The rules are clear. She's already set the record. No one can force her." I looked at Chase, a man once revered, now grasping desperately at whatever shred of pride he had left. The whole room, in that moment, hung between pity and a thirst to witness one more miracle. I knew I could decline, and I had every right to. But then I thought of all those looks earlier, all the mocking laughter, all the cold glances from the receptionist, from the crowd. Not just today, not just here, but a lifetime. I exhaled slowly. "I accept," I said, my voice calm, like the stillness before a storm. A collective gasp echoed through the room. Chase forced a tight smile and nodded. Linda nodded to the staff to set up fresh targets. Rules were announced quickly. 5 shots. Highest average score wins. In case of a tie, a shoot-off until a winner emerges. Chase turned and marched toward the elite shooting lanes, retrieving his custom Remington, a masterpiece worth tens of thousands. I stood there, feeling the steady beat of my heart. Unwavering, unshaken. Linda stepped beside me, lowering her voice. "He's desperate. Don't let him drag you down." I just gave a small smile. There was nothing Chase Whitmore could do today that would pull me from the solid ground beneath my feet. Chase was drawn to shoot first. He raised his precision-tuned gun, a work of art worth a small fortune. His eyes half closed, his posture, textbook, perfect. Bang, first shot. Hit the second ring from the center, not perfect. He frowned, readjusted. Bang, bang, second and third shots. Better, but clearly he was no longer at his peak. Pressure, rage, humiliation. They were eating away at Chase from the inside like acid. Bang! Bang! Fourth and fifth shots. He gave it his all, but the tension was plain in every pull of the trigger. Final result displayed: shot 1, 9 points, shot 2, 10 points, shot 3, 9 points, shot 4, 8 points, shot 5, 9 points, average score, 9.08, good score for an average shooter. But for Chase Whitmore, a disgrace. Then it was my turn. I stepped into the lane, feeling every brick beneath my feet lend me strength. I gripped the simple Glock 19, aimed at the target. Everything else faded away. Only the target remained. I exhaled, squeezed the trigger. Bang, first shot, dead center, no hesitation, no tremor. Bang, second shot, bullseye. I heard the crowd stir behind me, whispering, but I remained stone still. Bang, third shot, bullseye. A deep breath, a silence before the thunder. Bang, fourth shot, bullseye, 1 shot left. I relaxed my entire body, poured my heart and calm into the final squeeze. Bang! Fifth shot, bullseye. The screen lit up. Average score, 10.0. The entire shooting range erupted into applause. Some whistled. Some jumped to their feet. I lowered my gun, turned back, and looked at Chase. Now nothing more than a pile of ashes standing there. No more words were needed. The result was clear. Chase Whitmore, the once untouchable king of the elite shooters, club, had been officially dethroned by a woman he had judged and dismissed at first glance. The entire room exploded in applause. Some people jumped out of their seats, some whistled, and a few others, even those who had earlier mocked me, now couldn't hide the admiration in their eyes. I said nothing. I didn't need to. 3 bullseyes setting a record. 5 consecutive bullseyes defeating Chase Whitmore right before the crowd that once idolized him. I removed my protective glasses, slipped the Glock 19 back into my old leather bag, and turned my back on the perfectly shredded target. No need to look back. I knew I had just rewritten history in this place. Chase stood there like a ghost in the middle of the dazzling crowd. His expensive suit now looked no better than a cheap costume, unable to mask the defeated look on his face. He backed away step by step. His frantic eyes searched for an escape route. But there was none. No excuses. No salvation. The small world he had once ruled, with mocking laughter and sycophantic handshakes, was now turning its back on him. I saw Linda Carter approaching, holding a silver plaque, the one engraved with the names of the finest shooters since the elite shooters. Club was founded, Linda smiled. A real smile. Not the polite, rich people kind, but the smile of someone seasoned, someone who had just witnessed true justice being restored. "You've done what many only dare to dream," Linda said, her warm voice carrying across the room, still sparkling with applause. "And you deserve to be remembered." I accepted the silver pen from Linda's hand, my grip as steady as when I had held the gun. A simple name, Alex Morgan. Note, I've renamed you Alex Morgan here as you requested for character consistency. And beneath that, new record, 3 consecutive bullseyes. Victory 5-5 in direct challenge, just a few lines. But for me, it represented a lifetime of being underestimated, now permanently carved into this place. While I signed, from the corner of my eye, I saw Chase turn and walk away. No farewell, no excuses. Just a small, crumpled figure shrinking into the brilliance of a glory he no longer possessed. For the first time in his life, perhaps, Chase Whitmore tasted what he had long dished out to others: being ignored, being dismissed, being forgotten. I didn't feel joy. I didn't feel triumph. I only felt justice, and sometimes justice comes very cold. Linda handed me an honorary membership card, a rare privilege only a very select few had ever been given. "You're always welcome here, Alex," she said. "Anytime." Another wave of applause rose as I accepted the card. No more scornful looks, no more tight, uncomfortable frowns, only nods of respect. Hesitant handshakes from those who hadn't even bothered to glance at me when I first walked through that door. As I passed the front desk, the blonde receptionist stood frozen. Her eyes were wide, embarrassed. Gone was the quick, dismissive glance from earlier. All that remained was a small, silent bow, an unspoken apology. I smiled lightly. No anger, no need, because true validation doesn't come from their nods. It comes from within, from knowing your worth, no matter how anyone looks at you. I pushed open the heavy doors of the Elite Shooters Club and let the late afternoon sunlight wash over my face. Outside, the world kept spinning. Luxury cars still lined the front drive. Distant laughter and chatter still floated through the air. But I knew, within those gilded walls, something had changed forever. Not because I wanted to prove anything to them, but because I had proved something to myself. You don't need a fancy weapon. You don't need a glittering reputation. All you need is grit, belief, and a little stubbornness, and you can shoot through any wall they try to build in front of you. I left the Elite Shooters Club as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting streaks of deep crimson across the sky like fiery brushstrokes. I walked slowly across the parking lot, feeling each gust of breeze brushing against my face. The echoes of applause, of astonished murmurs, still lingered behind me. But within me, only one thing was rising: memory. I remembered how I first learned to hold a gun, not in fancy clubs, not with prestigious trainers, not in expensive classrooms with gleaming wood-paneled walls, but in my grandfather's backyard, on a dusty patch of land where weeds grew knee-high and rusty tin cans dangled from a crumbling fence. I was just an 8-year-old girl then, hair braided into 2 messy plaits, face smudged with dirt. And my grandfather, George Morgan, was a weathered man whose calloused hands and steady gaze had witnessed a century of storms. Grandpa didn't teach me to shoot to win. He taught me to shoot to defend myself, to be resilient, to never bow before anyone. I remembered the first time he placed that old hunting rifle into my small hands. It was far too big for me, so heavy I had to strain to hold it upright. "Strength isn't in the arms," Grandpa said, squatting down to meet my eyes. "It's in the heart." I didn't fully grasp his words then. I just tightened my grip, aimed at a swinging tin can, and squeezed the trigger. The recoil slammed into my small shoulder, knocking me backward onto the dusty ground. But when I looked up, the can had exploded, and Grandpa, he smiled. A rare, warm smile, like the first light of dawn piercing thick morning fog. "See," he said, "when you believe you can, no one can stop you." Summer after summer passed. I grew up by his side, practicing with everything from that old rifle to a second hand Glock he picked up at a flea market. No elite instructors, no fancy gear, just perseverance, lessons carved from failure, and one unwavering rule: respect the weapon, respect yourself, and never, ever use it to boast. When I was 15, Grandpa passed away. On a still autumn morning, so quiet you could hear the leaves fall. I stood silently by his grave, clutching the silver medallion he left me. One side engraved with an old rifle, the other with a single phrase: "Stand your ground." Years rolled on. I stepped into life, working ordinary jobs, wearing simple clothes, living an unassuming existence that few noticed. But deep inside, in every breath, in every heartbeat, were the summers that smelled of gunpowder, the sunsets spent aiming at rusty cans, and Grandpa's deep voice echoing like a solemn oath. And today, when I pulled the trigger 3 times in a row, standing before a crowd that had sized me up and dismissed me, I wasn't just firing at a paper target. I was shooting through every doubting glance, every whispered insult, every invisible wall built to separate the ordinary from the elite. I fired straight into the heart of arrogance, and I stood my ground. As I opened the car door, I caught a glimpse of myself in the rearview mirror. Reflected back was a woman, plain, unadorned, but her eyes were sharp as a blade honed by a lifetime of patience. I smiled softly, not a victorious smile. It didn't need to be. Just the smile of a once small girl whispering across the fiery sunset to her grandfather. "I did it, Grandpa." I drove out of the parking lot, the tires crunching softly over the gravel. The sunset spilled across the windshield, coating the world in a blazing golden hue. But inside me, everything was calm. No more gunshots, no more mocking laughter, no more scrutinizing stares, only a deep, unwavering peace, the kind no one could grant and no one could take away. Some might think today's victory was a reward, a sweet revenge, but to me, it was neither. I hadn't stepped into the elite shooters club to prove I was better than anyone. I hadn't stood atop the winner's podium seeking validation from those who had once scorned me. I had simply walked in, as I always had, carrying nothing but my true self. Simple, silent, and unbowed. In this life, you will meet countless people who judge you by the clothes you wear, the car you drive, the job you hold, or the number on your bank statement. They will pass judgment before you even open your mouth. They will laugh before they know a single chapter of your story, and if you're not strong enough, you might start believing the mold they cast for you. You might shrink yourself, accept a place you never truly belonged. But today, I reminded myself, and everyone who ever doubted true worth doesn't lie in the gaze of others. It lies in how you stand tall under that gaze. I remembered what my grandfather once told me. You can lose everything, your job, your money, even the admiration of others. But if you keep your pride and your integrity, you've never truly lost. Today, I understood that better than ever. No expensive gun, no luxurious outfit, no glittering medal, just a steady hand, a resolute heart, and an unshakable belief in myself. The Elite Shooters Club would open its doors again tomorrow, and every day after. The smug faces would keep walking in, clad in designer brands, believing they belonged to some elevated tier of existence. But now, among the great names etched into that cold silver wall, there was a new, humble name. Alex Morgan. No polished shoes, no fur-lined coats. No wealthy lineage or grand reputation, just a person who knew, without needing anyone's permission, that she belonged there. As I merged onto the highway, I glanced at the silver medallion swinging from the rearview mirror. That old medallion, engraved with the words Grandpa had once carved, "Stand your ground." I smiled, a soft smile, light as a breeze, and whispered, "For no one but the sky and myself to hear, I stood my ground, Grandpa, and I always will." Outro. Ending. In this life, there will always be people who think they know you at first glance. They will look down on you, mock you, and sometimes even try to tear you down. But true worth doesn't lie in the coat you wear, the car you drive, or the balance in your bank account. It lies in how you stand tall, in the unshakable resolve that no one can touch. I didn't defeat Chase Whitmore with just marksmanship. I defeated him with a lifetime's worth of lessons that taught me no one has the right to put a price on you, except yourself. And sometimes, the shots that echo the farthest come from those the world once deemed not worth noticing.